Welcome to Evidence Base, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're talking about parental anxiety. Our guest is Dr. Debra Kissen, co-author of Overcoming Parental Anxiety. Debra is a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO of Light on Anxiety CBT Treatment Center. Kissen specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety and related disorders and is co-author of the Panic Workbook for Teens, Rewire Your Anxious Brain for Teens, and Break Free from Intrusive Thoughts. Kissen also has a special interest in the principles of mindfulness and their application for anxiety disorders and has presented her research on CBT and mindfulness-based treatments for anxiety and related disorders at regional and national conferences. Kissen is co-chair of the Anxiety and Depression Association of America Public Education Committee and was recipient of the 2020 Gratitude for Giving Spirit Award and the 2018 ADAA Member of Distinction Award. Kissen often serves as a media psychologist and strives to further the dissemination of empirically supported treatment information by offering simple-to-understand practical tips and solutions to help mental health consumers move past stress and anxiety. Hi, Debra. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to talk about this. I think a lot of parents can relate to parental anxiety. So I thought we could kick off by just talking about what is the parent brain and how can someone strengthen theirs?
So the parent brain is well, depending on the animal, but if we're talking about human parent brains, it is like all other brains, but in some ways I think there's an underappreciated difference when it comes to, we use the term the brain on parenting. And so the very parts of the brain that allow for social connections and that we humans are meant to have empathy and we're meant to feel what others feel in order to be part of a tribe, and we're not big, powerful animals that can survive on our own. We really do need each other for survival purposes. And so that same part of the brain that allows for social connections and feeling what other feels is kind of on overdrive when it comes to the mirror neurons that will ignite when another party feels something. If they feel bad, wow, I feel bad. Or we could watch a movie and tear up when something happens to a character. And so certainly when it comes to your own child, that those mirror neurons allow for so much caregiving behaviors. And that's critical. We humans are born without the ability to take care of ourselves for a very long time. And so there has to be something that inspires us as parents to constantly put the caregiving of another before ours. And that those same mirror neurons continue on. So as a parent, we're feeling so much more than our own experience, the highs, the lows, and it's magical, it's challenging, and so the rate of stress and anxiety in parents is extremely high, and not surprisingly, but in some ways it's not always spoken about because it just seems like the kind of thing that, well, everyone else seems to have it down. It's not that complicated. So many people are parents, and why am I making this so much harder than it needs to be?
Yeah, well, I think what's great about your book is you tap into that neuroscience and you talk about neuroplasticity. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and how it works.
Yeah. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, it's in popular press, we might hear like rewiring the brain. And so it's a very optimistic way to understand how our brain works. And in the past, there used to be beliefs that at a certain point, maybe when you hit puberty or adolescence, your brain kind of stops developing. And then the brain that you have is the brain that you're going to have for life. But in reality, we're constantly rewiring. The rate might be immense when we're little and it slows down, but we're still able to continue to learn new things. And every time we learn something new, that thought, that behavior becomes a series of neurons that are wiring together. So there's an expression of neurons that fire together, wire together. And so the more we practice a new behavior, and it might feel really a new way to look at something or do something, it may feel super duper hard the first few times. The more that we do it, the more it becomes automatic. And so we can't remove anything from our brain unless procedures that would not be fun for
Yes.
unless utterly necessary. But what we can do is create new neural networks, so new paths on top of old paths. And so there might be the possibility of reverting back to old ways because that old path is still there, but at the same time, we're kind of creating new grooves and new ways of thinking and doing. And so progress is always possible. And that's something that when it comes to mental health, we should all feel really optimistic about, that we can continue to create change in our own lives and our own brains.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice promise because, like you said, some people just feel like, oh, I'm just set in my ways, like this can't change. And I think what you're offering here specifically, like, is really powerful because you feel like you're always going to feel that overwhelming anxiety for your kid, and what you're offering is a way to sort of work with that and create those new pathways and change that pattern.
And there's sort of and there's more. It's like one of those late night ads. And there's more. Get this extra. But the extra thing is really hard as a parent. I have 3 kids and squeezing in self-care. And we throw around these words, things that we should do because they're healthy, but they're really, really, really hard. And that natural instinct to take care of your kids first, it could feel really uncomfortable. It's not the kind of thing that one wants to do to take care of themselves because they might feel
Hmm.
guilt and they might feel like, but my child is experiencing distress right now. Like, I don't care as much about myself. And the good news is, like, you don't need to care as much about yourself, but by sometimes trying so hard to like create change for our child, like, you just need to calm down. You just need to take a deep breath. Like, you just need to take things less personally, all the things we would wish for them. We actually can
Yeah.
control another human being. Like, we could work our magic in different ways in the environment, but the actual emotional regulation skills that they're going to learn, like, they're going to have to learn through different life experiences. And that could feel really, it is really
Hmm.
frustrating when you see someone you love maybe getting really overwhelmed or losing control. But if we could work on our own brain, their mirror neurons are also picking up on that as well. So when they see us either have a really hard time, like lose it, yell, and then like, okay, that was not effective. I'm going to take a moment. Instead of telling them to calm down, when we're calming down, their brain is witnessing that and is learning that emotional regulation skill. And also when we as parents are feeling very activated and showing big emotions, they're going to feel big emotions. So that sync that we have with our kid, by calming down in their presence, they're going to also learn how to calm down too. So we can do it for them too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like what you said where, like, even if you don't wanna do it for yourself, what you're doing
Right.
is for your kid, right? Like,
Right.
I read that somewhere, and I can't remember where I read it, but when a kid first gets hurt, they're looking to you for how they should react. Like, they're gonna see how you react to that, and that's gonna play into how they react, so that mirror neuron is so powerful right there.
Right. Right. And I'm sure we all have different moments of maybe not getting the response that maybe we wish that we got. And then we could kind of feel like, oh, that was so my not maybe the first reaction of feeling panic versus feeling that things are going to be okay. So that's okay. None of us are going to be perfect,
Mhm.
but if it inspires doing the work that we could do it for our kids, and that's okay too. Like, if a parent had to give themselves stress management skills for themselves, very few would do it.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
don't have to do it for yourself.
Yeah. Deborah, why is cognitive behavioral therapy helpful for rewiring that parent brain?
Well, when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, it's a pretty big umbrella, which is a good thing. I think a lot of people are more and more being told when you go to a therapist, may ask for CBT, and so we kind of throw out this term a lot. But what we mean by CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, are different treatments under that umbrella that are empirically supported. That there's research that's randomized controlled trials that show that X is more effective than Y based on the data. So it's using different skills and techniques that evidence is showing can create change. And so it's a very action oriented approach, the different components of noticing our cognitions, our thoughts, noticing the ones that may hook us, how accurate are they or maladaptive? Are there more realistic interpretations? How do we learn to get unstuck from our hot thoughts? And then the behavior, what are the different behaviors that we tend to engage in more frequently that in the short term, we only do things because they work. So whether that's I'm going to eat something I said I wasn't going to eat because in that moment we get relief, or I just yelled because we get a little bit of a relief. All the little things that we do are coping behaviors. They just may be ineffective long term in terms of helping to live the life that we want to live. And so what are more effective coping behaviors? Even if in the moment they might not allow for the same relief, are they helping us to move more and more towards the life that we want to live? And so when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy tools and techniques, it's helping to address the cognitions, behaviors to craft the life that you want to live. So all of these things helpful in creating change in your brain, which is what health progress is that when we're rewiring our brains and bodies to perform more effectively.
Yeah, and you briefly mentioned shame earlier, so I want to go back to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the role that shame plays in the parent brain, and the solution that you bring up in the book is self-compassion? Can you talk about how that would help with that shame?
Shame is important in terms of kind of keeping us in check as in the tribe, in the group, when we do something that may be inappropriate, that may get us rejected. That shame, that feeling is supposed to, like, oh, when I stole that, or when I hurt this person, when I did this thing, it caused a reaction that was very, negative judgment from others. And it could feel dangerous. Like, I shouldn't do these things because it could negatively impact my life. I get kicked out of the tribe. So a little shame can go a long way, but it also is so powerful and it feels so bad. And so as modern humans, we have the same prehistoric brain that we've had since sort of the beginning of time when man walked the planet. And so maybe the certain behaviors that would bring on shame, there'd be a few and they would create the results. But in modern life, there's so many different moments of, oh no, did I just offend that? We're dealing with people who think differently, act differently. We might be part of a mommy group where they remembered to pack snacks and I didn't remember to pack snacks. It's not an insular little world where engaging in certain different behaviors is rare. And so there's so many different moments when we interact with each other to feel shame, like, oh no, did I just do something wrong? Did I get something wrong? And when it comes to parenting, especially modern day parenting, we're so isolated and we're not often part of this deep interdependent community where we're learning from others and in like a circle of care where we're really relying on a lot of new people in our lives that we don't have that same trust that we're there for each other pretty much through and through unless something terrible happens. So it's like we feel like we need to be on guard for judgment, yet there's so many things that can go wrong as a parent. Going back to the beginning of like, there's just so much that we can control. And I don't have the exact number of like, different as our child grows up, but even at the times that we have the most control with a newborn, it could be with sleep training, with getting on a schedule, with having a more fussy baby or not fussy baby. The time, the opportunity to start shaming ourselves can start in pregnancy. Like, I'm not eating as healthy as I should. The shoulds are rampant.
Yeah. And I have to wonder too, like you said, like there's so much more isolation, like in social media, people are putting their best parent
Mm-hmm.
self forward. So it's probably very easy, even there, just what they're seeing as the highlight reel to
Right.
compare to.
It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but like as adults, we're a little bit more protected in some ways than like teens who have like emerging sense of self and look a lot more social comparison. But as a parent in this new role and kind of learning from others and looking to others, it is, probably, we talk about the teen brain and social media, but definitely the parent brain and and those kind of comparisons that are healthy in some ways because we're supposed to learn from others, but so unhealthy the way it can show up in modern life with social media. So that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not a parent, but I feel like I related to this part in reading your book about catastrophic thinking and realistic thinking. I'm wondering if you can talk about those two and sort of how someone can shift from catastrophic to realistic thinking.
Well, step one for whether catastrophic thinking in any role in our life, and that could be, oh no, I'm going to do terrible in this presentation, and then everyone's going to know I don't know anything, and then I'm going to get fired from work, and then I'm going to disappoint my family, and then I'm going to get divorced and end up homeless. Wherever we go, and we often go to the same places, there are different roads, and it could be like in our career life, catastrophic thoughts, and in our interpersonal life. But if your core scary thought is ending up alone or being a huge disappointment, it takes some uncovering through, you might say, a downward arrow. You might say, okay, what would be so bad about that? What would be so bad about that? And eventually you could kind of get to, like, for each individual, what is that, the thought, the belief that feels the most unbearably terrifying and awful to sit with. And so part of the work is identifying when they're coming up, and it happens so automatic that it just feels true. Like, I just am a failure. I just am, something terrible is going to happen to my child. So kind of slowing it down through, you normally know first because you just feel really bad. So it's one thing if you feel really bad and something terrible just actually happened in your life. Like, I feel really bad and someone just robbed me. Like, yes, that makes sense. But like, I'm sitting somewhere and I feel a sinking, terrible feeling, yet there's nothing in the immediate environment that actually is linking with this moment. And then if you kind of like rewind back and start noticing, like, okay, well, what was I just thinking? So you might like kind of do a thought log and start tracking moments that when you're feeling discomfort above average. So like above a 5, okay, I'm feeling like if a 10 is really bad, feeling a 7, okay, and starting with the feeling. So what am I feeling? I have a heavy feeling. My head feels like it's spinning. Like, I feel like I've been thinking about a ton of things. My thoughts are racing. Okay. Then what are some of the thoughts? Like, why didn't my child get invited to that birthday party? Did all the other kids get invited to that birthday party? Like, are they annoying the other kids? Is there something not likable about them? Like, just starting to notice what is showing up in that moment. And then you could kind of do a downward arrow from there of like, okay, and if they didn't get invited, what would be so bad about that? That means no one likes them. And if no one likes them, what is it? And so you could kind of do different exercise to get to those catastrophic thoughts. And once you get to them, you could start playing with them and learning how to move through them. Because often we spend our life trying to kind of run from those thoughts. If I could just think my way to a solution, then that thought isn't true. But we can't actually outrun our catastrophic thoughts. But if we could make contact with them and play with them and come up with more realistic, like, maybe everyone isn't going to like my child, but there are certain qualities, like they're going to find their people, and maybe there are different solutions. Like, maybe there are different activities that can help to find their people, but you can't do effective problem solving until you get unstuck from the catastrophic thinking.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Fox, author of the Borderline Personality Disorder Workbook. When you first are diagnosed with BPD, or you're first told that you may have borderline personality disorder, it can be very frightening and overwhelming because we have these ideas of what this disorder is, and you can feel trapped within it, trapped within this view or perspective of this thing that feels bigger than you and bigger than life. But the reality is that this is a disorder that can be managed, and that learning adaptive strategies can help you control it and do your life differently so that you determine the course of your life, not your BPD. To learn more and to sign up, go to bpdcourse.com.
In your work with parents, how do you work through sort of the the large catastrophes that we are often seeing on the news, like obviously like COVID, like school shootings, climate change, like these things do impact directly like children's lives. Like how do you work through those sort of global catastrophic thinking and like not bring that into your parenting brain?
Terrible things really do happen.
Mhm.
And so terrible things are going to happen. And then we're going to have to cope with those terrible things when they're happening. But when we're worrying and thinking and ruminating about all the bad things that happen, we're kind of taking a moment where in fact, like our pants aren't on fire and feeling all of that discomfort. And it's not like we're actually solving the problem either of making things better. So interestingly, worrying, it could feel like people say, oh, I can't stop worrying, or it feels like something that's happening to you. But the brain on worrying, it's like you fall in a ditch and you only have a shovel, so you just keep shoveling and you're just getting deeper and deeper. So it's something that when we're worrying, we actually are parasympathetic nervous system. So we actually feel a little more calm because it feels like we're doing something in that moment. So like other compulsions that maybe I feel dreamy, I'm going to wash my hands. I feel worried about the world on fire. Like, where will my kids live? Like, what's the future going to be like? It feels like somehow we're solving something. And so we worry as a way to get temporary relief. And so sometimes we'll do actually exposures to the fear. So like, let's just make contact with the fact that like there is climate change and like feel the sorrow and feel the mourning for a healthier world, like really making contact with the hard stuff and like sitting with it and like opening up to the pain versus trying to solve what can't be solved. We don't, not forever, but moments of actually not running and just making contact with all the hard stuff.
Yeah, it's that lack of control that's going to send the worry into overdrive.
Right. And then deciding like, okay, how many moments of our life we're going to mourn, how many moments of a life we're going to try to make the world better, how many we're just going to play and live, and kind of making those choices depending on the moments. But trying to run from all the pain never works, although it makes sense that we all want to.
Right, right. I feel like what we're talking about kind of goes along with a concept you introduce in the book called brain spam. Can you say a little bit more about that?
We might get a email like, oh, your account with your ComEd it hasn't been paid, and so please log in to give new credit card. We're gonna shut off your power immediately. And we know hopefully more and more like when something is spam, and that sounds scary, that sounds bad, and I don't need to actually respond to it. It's a false alarm or it's something trying to get my attention, and I can delete it. I should delete it and move on. And so sometimes our brain is going to give us this like, uh-oh, watch out for blank. Our brain has false alarm moments too. So say I'm like holding a knife and my child is next to me in the kitchen, like, uh-oh, don't stab them when you're cutting the carrot. So I wasn't planning on stabbing them anyway, but it's kind of pointing out, be careful, don't do that.
Yeah.
And so for some people, it could feel like, oh no, that means I want to. That's an important message. It's just your brain taking different content, knife, child, sharp object, and sending you a signal that you could choose, okay, but they're sitting 4 feet away from me. I'm over here. It's okay. So it's offering up a message, and you can choose to, I'm going to delete that. This moment is actually okay.
Yeah.
And often throughout the day, we might have this like driving in the car. Oh no, don't put your feet over the gas when you're at a stop sign. We often get these messages like, be careful, don't do this.
Mhm.
And we could choose, I mean, we are going to listen to that, but we weren't planning on doing it anyway. So
Unhelpful.
yeah, we just get these like warning messages all the time telling us things that, well, I wasn't planning on doing that anyway. So that message is actually distracting, but thanks anyway. So that's kind of when we talk about brain spam, it's just sending us these very attention catching messages that we could choose what to do with.
Yeah. And how can mindfulness help like with the anxiety and stress of a parent brain? And for those parents who maybe say that they don't have time for mindfulness, what are some quick ways to add more mindfulness to their day?
And mindfulness definitely is one of those things that when we think about self-care, that sometimes people feel like they should want to engage in mindfulness and I don't have time to, but it's similar than going to the gym. You don't have to want to get some
Mm-hmm.
exercise to understand that it is good for you, and it may feel like there's other things you'd rather do, but it's helping you to get stronger. So mindfulness is really attentional training. Like, how do I practice returning to the current moment? That means engaging in whatever I'm choosing to engage in. So the current moment could be playing with my child and I have the thought, oh, the dishes are piling up and oh, I have all that work to do. And how do we notice that thought and maybe decide, okay, I've decided I'm going to spend 15 minutes really mindfully engaging, and I'm going to notice all the stress thoughts and all the things that are coming up telling me I need to be doing other things. They're going to come up. We all have monkey minds. They're going to point out all this way and that. And then we just practice noticing that and then returning back, anchoring ourselves in whatever it is that we're choosing to do. And so some people think about mindfulness, I need to go on an all-day silent retreat, or I need an hour, but starting with 1 minute, and that could be 1 minute online waiting for a coffee at Starbucks, and you choose to focus on your breath for 1 minute. Or you could pick a visual, like I'm going to in this moment keep attending to the color on the wall, because it's really about, how do I choose? I'm going to pay attention to this, notice what's pulling me away, and then just keep returning. And certainly, like a conversation with your child, you could choose to, like, I'm going to just keep putting my attention back onto them. And I would just say it's really hard. So don't push, I should be doing that all my life. That's not possible. Like, we need times that we're thinking about other things and doing other things. So maybe starting with, for 2 minutes, you don't even have to let them know you're doing this, but I'm going to set a timer to myself that I'm just going to really focus on, like, putting my attention back on what they're saying or what my partner is saying. And so there are lots of little moments to practice that don't involve needing a whole hour to work your mindfulness mental muscle.
Yeah, I think that's such a nice promise too, because at the end of the day, like you want to be in those moments with your partner or your child, and like letting those sort of other thoughts stray away is taking you from that value of spending that quality time with them.
And you can notice the judgment, because the judgment will show up,
Mhm.
like, why can't I just do this? Like, this should be natural. I'm okay. And I notice that. And now I'm going to return back. And so it's really this muscle of returning, gently guiding your attention back versus yanking it and pulling it and taunting it. Like, why are you not just able to stay still? Because that's not, for survival purposes, we do need to be thinking, scanning, moving around to take in a lot of different information. That's helpful. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're talking about a parent experiencing emotional distress, how can they work on breaking that cycle and building up that resilience in their brain?
So, in terms of emotional distress, there are just so many different stressors through the day. We may be in traffic. Our child might be having a tantrum and we're trying to compassionately disengage. Sometimes we may be able to do something. We might have the time to take a step back and rethink the situation, try to have a more realistic interpretation. Sometimes we're just kind of in that moment and there's not really the time for really, like, reflection or deep problem solving on how to handle that. So sometimes there are just different shortcuts that we can engage in, and that might be anything from, we can hold an ice cube and feel the cold sensation. We can kind of change the channel of our brain. Maybe we just had a frustrating moment with our child and now we have like 1 minute to regroup and we have to return back to a business meeting. So how do we kind of reboot, change the channel of our brain? It doesn't mean there might not be a problem to tend to later on in some way, but in that moment, we are just looking to get from high tension to be able to move to the next moment. And so that could be just going from, let's say, being indoors to going outside, and that different sensation of the sun or the rain or something like that gives that kind of reboot. So it could be standing up and from your desk, going for a walk, getting water, mindfully feeling the water in your mouth. So different ways to give yourself a little emotional regulation, a little tension relief can go a long way. And it's not cheating. It's just sometimes we have just enough time to take it down a few notches. And that's the kind of thing we want to be able to show our kids as well, that by being really hunched over versus actually expanding our arms, we could use our body, the signal that our body is sending to our brain that says things are okay. You can relax. You can change how you're breathing, right? So there are different ways to work with the body to change our brain signaling. So I just threw a lot of different ways. So you don't have to feel overwhelmed by them, but know that there are different emotional regulation techniques that can give the relief that we need in different moments of our day.
Yeah, and it sounds like they don't need to be complicated, but something quick and in the moment that can just get you through that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the key is to know it's like any toolbox. I'm not a big builder person, but we might have some little tools, big tools, some tools we use more frequently. And the key is just having a toolbox with enough diversity of techniques and options that you can reach for different tools depending on the moment and what's going to be the most effective way to manage it.
Can you talk about the concept of short-term pain, long-term gain?
A lot of the things that we naturally do as animals, like we're all driven to the thing that feels good, and we want to stay away from the thing that feels bad. And that just is good for survival. It feels bad to get hurt. It feels good to have a meal. And so it makes sense that a lot of the signals that we get move us towards that kind of relief. But as humans, some of the more complex things that we need to manage, some of that immediate relief that we get in other situations, like if we have a flat tire, it makes sense to change the tire. But say we have an important meeting for work and it's going to be important for our career and it's going to offer us opportunities, but it also feels really stressful. We could stay home that day and not go to that meeting. We might feel, or for kids, certainly with school, we're going to get relief when we don't do the thing that's hard. At the same time, it can certainly pile up as we're avoiding. So avoidance is is a challenging part of the human experience because it feels so good and we get so much relief and it quickly piles up. So a lot of the things that we do as we rewire our brain for more effective coping might involve some short-term discomfort, kind of like going to the gym, and it might feel uncomfortable to do a pull-up. And at the same time, we're getting stronger. And so that might be, for example, your kid is having a tantrum. You told them they have 5 more minutes of technology and then they can either put it away or you're going to take it away and put it away for the night. And then they don't put it away and you take it away and then they start yelling and maybe you have another kid who's sleeping and you don't want them to wake up, or there might be another, or just you're so exhausted and I'm just going to give it back to them. That might reinforce that moment. Or often we might yell to make them stop yelling. And what that's showing is yelling is also a good solution. So in that moment, it's going to feel better though than just walking away and compassionately disengaging. Like, I love you, but this is over. And you could just walk away and let them ride out that frustration. That's going to feel hard in that moment, but it's going to create long-term relief and healing. So it's short-term discomfort, long-term healing and relief. A lot of the harder things we humans need to do are going to involve that
Yeah.
interpersonally and emotionally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And earlier we talked a bit about that lack of control causes anxiety, but what are some common parental attempts at control and how can they start to relinquish that control?
Oh, wow. This is a big one. The list goes. So parental attempts at control, and there's age appropriate control also.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a 2-year-old putting the raincoat on them, you still have that control. That is still age appropriate. For your 6-year-old and they're in the park and they choose to take off their raincoat, you could run around after them, and that might be less effective than letting them learn that they maybe it gets uncomfortable to get wet, and so that natural consequence of it. Or maybe when a child is young, it makes sense to arrange play dates, and maybe when they get older, you may prefer that they had other friends, but kind of pointing out that unless there's a major problem, friends X are not good for them, friends Y would be better. That message is going to be less well received. And it might feel really, really hard to witness your child making mistakes, that you do have answers for what could be different for them, but that's not what they're looking to you for. And you sharing some of that information might create an oppositional response as well, of them not wanting to listen to your probably appropriate advice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many things that we witness as parents that if only we had a remote control and could get our kids to do things differently, but we don't.
Of course. Yeah, this also feels like it relates to adult children as well. Like sometimes the parents have that
Oh,
trouble letting go of that control and still trying to control what their adult child is doing.
100, yeah, what your adult child is doing for their own children, it never ever ends. So it doesn't, yeah, there's not an age where your brain is like, okay, they're an adult. I no longer feel deep desire to control what they're doing so they could live their best life.
Yeah. And when the parent is, sort of relinquishing some of that control, what is that enhanced autonomy on the child's part doing for their brain?
The most effective way for all of us to learn is through experience. So somebody making us sit down and study for that test, maybe an 8th grader, like you can't have access to your phone until you finish your homework, versus an 8th grade, understand the consequence of not getting that assignment in and maybe getting a bad grade, maybe having to stay in during recess, or whatever the natural consequence in their environment. The sooner they learn that, the better off they're going to be in college, the better off they're going to be in their first job, because we can't always be there to make sure they're doing the right things. The earlier we can learn the natural consequences of doing X versus Y, the more the wiring for each person's brain on that topic, and the deeper it's going to be how to handle situations like that.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And as we start to wrap up, I want to ask about what does it mean to redefine imperfect parenting and why is this important?
And it probably relates to what you so wisely kind of mentioned about the social media and the shame and need for self-compassion, which is sort of the flip side of shame and judgment. So self-compassion doesn't mean an excuse. It's not an excuse for not being our best selves, but it is a starting point of, it makes sense. We're going to always get things wrong. And then from there, what is like the next thing we can try to do to move in the direction of our values? So no matter what, it's going to be imperfect. No matter what, every single day as a parent, as a human, that's just sort of the starting place and the ending place. But within that imperfection, how do we live a life of meaning, of joy, of satisfaction? We still can do those things. And we're just stumbling along, learning a little bit as we go, just like everybody else. But that striving for the unattainable just gets in our way and leads to frustration and hopelessness, and needs to be put aside across all aspects of life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Deborah, that's a good place to wrap up unless you have any final thoughts for the listeners.
Now, this is just a really fun conversation, so I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Really great questions, and you got me thinking about a lot of things. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate all your work on the topic. I know your book and this conversation are going to help a lot of parents through this very hard thing of parental anxiety. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Be the calm and collected parent you aspire to be with this powerful neuroscience-based guide. Do you worry about your child all the time? Maybe they're behind on certain milestones, struggling in school, having difficulty making friends, or heading off to college and away from home for the first time. Their problems or struggles become your own, and you end up feeling so anxious that you forget what it's like to just enjoy being their parent. The good news is that you can rewire your parent brain to respond differently to these challenges. This book will show you how to replace parental anxiety with parental effectiveness. In overcoming parental anxiety, 3 anxiety specialists team up to help you change your anxious brain using the core principles of neuroscience and exercises from cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness. You'll learn how to overcome worry by identifying your parental values, paying attention to the moment, and cultivating self-compassion. Most importantly, you'll find targeted exercises to help minimize parenting-related worry and anxiety so you can live more fully and enjoy the shared experiences you have with your children. Thanks to the brain's lifelong ability to create new neural connections, you can achieve that coveted and elusive sense of calm that seems to come so easily to some parents. And by practicing the simple neuroscience-based skills in this book, you can overcome your parental anxiety, stress less, and be more present with your kids. Why not get started now? Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee-owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. The best continuing education training does more than just fulfill requirements. It opens your mind to new possibilities, increases your confidence, and gives you powerful tools to transform your clients' lives. Praxis Continuing Education and Training partners with world-class experts to create cutting-edge, evidence-based courses for mental and behavioral health professionals. Learn how to heal trauma with Robin Walzer, explore values with Kelly Wilson, and master the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy with Matt Boone through an on-demand course. Or join experts and like-minded professionals live to take your practice to a new level. Find your next training opportunity at praxiscet.com. That's praxiscet.com. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.